Please make sure your cell phones are turned to the silent mode. Service will be conducted by Rabbi David Oler.
We have gathered together this morning, sharing our sorrow to bid farewell to Michael Barry Warren. We recall the many blessings of Mike's life. We are grateful for the precious memories which shall endure as long as we live. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight, though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, yet find strength in what remains behind, and the primal sympathy which having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, in the years that bring the philosophic mind. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. We meet to celebrate the life of Michael Warren, to express with love how much Mike meant to us. We meet to support one another, to affirm life, to affirm that Michael was important to us. We join together to express our love, to share together in our loss as we celebrate his life. The love of the human heart is the most real and the most beautiful of all the realities we know. It is the richest gift of our humanness. It is the love that joins us together as lovers, as husband and wife, as parent and child, and as friends and neighbors. Whatever the length of time may be, to have known something of this is to have experienced the supreme privilege of being human. The anguish of parting cannot destroy this most real of all realities. The love has been, the affection has existed, the ties have been woven. Life has been shared, the joys and the sorrows. This has been as real and strong as anything in life. The love that once was born can never die, for it has become part of us, of our life, woven into the very texture of our being. Each of us would wish to leave some part of ourselves, yes, every one of us, some memory, some influence for good. So here and now, we bear witness to the one we knew in life, who now in death bequeaths a subtle part, precious and beloved, which will be with us in truth and in beauty, in dignity and courage and love to the end of our days. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echzar, b'nodesha yar b'itzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshoveh, v'yan cheni b'ma'aglei tzedek, l'ma'an shemo, gam ki elech begeit salmovet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha himo yanachamuni, taroch lefonai shulchan neged sorarai, Dishanto v'Hashem roshi, kosi rivaya. Akto v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shafti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. Please join me now in the translation of Psalm 23, which I just read, in these brochures, with Mike's picture on the front, right in the middle, on the second page. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The separateness, the uniqueness of each human life is the basis of our grief in bereavement. Look to the whole world, and there is no one like the one we have lost. But Mike still lives on in our memories, and though no longer a visible part of our lives, he will always remain a member of this family through the influences that he has had and through the special part he has played in your lives. Fear not death. We are each of us destined to die. We share death with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Death is better than a life of pain and eternal rest than constant sickness. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are man's few days in eternity. The good things in life last for limited days, but a good name endures forever. We come here today with many mixed emotions. We're sad, very sad, grief-stricken to have lost Michael. We are proud that he struggled so hard, so valiantly to live for the last several years. We are comforted somewhat to know that he was doing better, he was doing okay for the last little while, but then sad that he died suddenly, which makes it harder for us to not have expected to happen imminently. For the last 23 years, he was married to Brenda. They had a wonderful relationship. Each was the focus of the other's life. Brenda said to me, Mike meant everything to me. They traveled the world together, and she shared with me how he would say, we had a really good run. Brenda was continuously at Mike's side with deep devotion throughout his illness. Mike was blessed with 3 children: Todd, Scott, and Tracy. He was a very supportive father. Mike was active in their sports activities. In fact, he was a baseball coach for a time. He was always committed to their growth and development, to their secular and Jewish educations. And he was extremely proud of the achievements of each of them. And they loved him very much because of the concerned, present, loving father that he was. When they each married, Mike welcomed Lisa, Julie, and Yogev. He was very welcoming and very fond, actually, of each of them as a specific person. And he went out of his way to be warm to them and to treat them as if they were his own children. Mike especially felt blessed to have his grandchildren: Zachary, Cameron, Taylor, Zoe, Ellie, Noah, Emma, Noah, Tal, and Ori. If you asked him, he would tell you that they were the light of his life. From Florida, when he was here, he was more engaged with them directly, physically, but when he was in Florida, they talked to him all the time on the phone. And that really lit up his day. They loved their Papa Mike, as they called him, and he loved them so very much. Mike was a popular kind of man. He had many friends. He was warm-hearted, and people could feel that. He was charming and witty. Mike was an avid storyteller, and he enjoyed, therefore, being a public speaker. His career involved sales, and his territory included Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. More than anything, in terms of career, he enjoyed marketing. His work colleagues were like a second family to him. Mike had a strong ethical code. He wouldn't ask someone in his business to do something that he himself was not willing to do. And he was respected for that. And there are many ways, including what I just mentioned, that he serves as a model for the generations that are coming up. Mike was very proud to be a Jew. He cared deeply about Israel. He cared deeply about Jewish continuity and Jewish education in general, and for his grandchildren in particular. Mike was very proud to have served in the Army of the United States of America. We all join together in prayer and in hopefulness that Michael ben Yosef, the Diddle, Michael, Barry, Warren, will rest in peace, and that his memory will be an ongoing source of inspiration for all of us in the years ahead. And let us all say, Amen. Sharing thoughts with you this morning are, first of all, Mike's oldest grandson, Zachary.
Hello, I'm Zach Warren, the firstborn grandson to Papa Mike. I'll be speaking on behalf of all the grandkids today, but just wanted to thank everyone for coming, everyone who's in attendance, and everyone here who's watching online through Zoom. I feel very fortunate to have had my Papa Mike in my life over the last 28 years. As I was a child, he attended nearly all my baseball games, took me to my first of many Bears games, and we got to experience a White Sox World Series game in person together. All very special moments. When I think of him, I can't help but to think of his very bizarre taste in foods. Liverwurst and pork rinds with cream cheese come to mind. Certainly not kosher on any levels. However, he did introduce... Cream cheese is good, okay. However, he did introduce us to Wendy's Frosties that he would say were made by angels. He was notorious for enjoying them with 2 straws. As I grew older, I felt that he tried providing words of wisdom to me and treated me as an adult, which I respected. He didn't sugarcoat it. Not every day is Hanukkah, something he once told me that really stuck with me. Nothing is just handed to you. You really need to work for everything you want and be fortunate for everything you have. When we questioned why he was eating pie for breakfast, he would tell us that his mother would come home from work with a chocolate eclair on occasion for him and his sister, and they considered this very special. So he would treat himself to desserts more often than not to remind himself that he has it pretty good. Still not sure why he needed to have it for breakfast, but that was his thing. His big thing was public speaking. It was a large part of his career that he really took seriously. He worked really hard during his career and was on the road a lot, mainly in some pretty uneventful cities, he would tell me. He let us know that he has been to West Virginia, and it is no big bargain. If you wanted to meet someone with a woman with bad teeth, then Mississippi is for you. He told me that he would spend extensive time preparing for his presentations, to the point where even if he had zero idea what he was talking about, he was still able to get the audience roaring at the end. When he sold his house in Chicago, he had my brother and me come over to his house to pick through all his old work clothes, mainly just dreck that he was going to throw out, but he had some old cowboy boots and hats and party shirts and older stuff that if we ever wore it, would probably be used for costumes. But however, he did have a number of ties that he spoke passionately about, recalling the time, occasion that he would wear them. I'll admit they weren't my favorite, and I felt that I would never wear them in public. They had like American flags on them, just kind of cheesy. But I felt on today's occasion I'd wear one of his ties because I felt he'd appreciate that. Over the years, he would tell me stories about himself that I'd never known about him. He was at a club in Las Vegas with some friends, one of which was a big shot, and told them that everything would be comped. When the bill came at the end of the night, the friend was nowhere to be found, and Papa Mike and a few others were left covering the bill. Or he would tell me about his days in the Army, where he'd place a rifle next to his collarbone so that when he fired it, it would kick back in hopes to shatter his bone so he can go home. He really had an interesting life. Although I'm sad that I wasn't able to be with him in person over the last couple of years, I was lucky enough to talk to him on the phone and make up for lost time. Something I will always remember is the fact that every time I called him, he said, "I love you," and had the coin phrase, "drive safe," even if I had just told him I was walking home from work. But the point is that he cared so much about all of us. Each call, he remembered what we talked about prior and was curious and proud of what we had going on in our lives. We love you, Papa Mike. You'll be missed.
That's very nice. Tracy?
Good morning. On behalf of my family, my husband Yogev, my 3 children, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today in person and on the WebEx. It warms my heart to see so many here. Michael, of course, would have preferred a standing room only sort of occasion, but I think if times were different, we probably would have gotten there. Needless to say, my father was charming. He was funny. He could talk to anyone. He had this innate ability to really understand people, and he had great insight into what made them tick and what was important to them as individuals, and it made him very personable. I especially appreciate this trait as it related to my kids, his grandchildren. He never treated them as children, always as really as adults, or like mini people, he used to like to call them. As they grew, he followed their singing debuts, their music careers, academic achievements, all their sporting activities. He even, in later life, began to follow Premier League soccer and would often call to tell me when curling was on TV, as he was convinced that his granddaughter would one day represent Israel in the Winter Olympics in that sport. It is really difficult to think of my father without thinking of Yogev and my children, as I see so much of him in them. Noah as a storyteller. A writer with the ability to persuade and the gift of making the complex simple. And Tal, who inherited Papa Mike's beautiful mane of hair and, unfortunately, his ears, as well as his ability to make people laugh and his passion for all things related to World War II. No idea why. And Ori, who shared Papa Mike's love and passion for corned beef. Baseball, they had the same complicated love-hate relationship with the Chicago Bears, and Ori's passion for a good three-piece suit. But when I think about my father, I think about all the things I learned from him, whether by word or by action. And so I'd like to share a couple of those lessons now. So growing up, we had dogs, one in particular, Coco, who was with us the longest. My father did not have a dog growing up, and to say he was ambivalent on the subject would be an understatement. He often referred to Coco not by name, but by damn dog. Where's the damn dog? Why is the damn dog on the couch? Did anyone feed the damn dog? You get the idea. So much so that I'm fairly certain that Coco thought his name was damn dog. But when Coco passed away, my father by far was the most distraught of any of us, which was fairly, unexpected at the time. And so lesson one, love can come in the most unexpected ways if you keep your eyes and your heart open. As you've heard and as you will hear more about, my father was a Little League coach for a number of years. He would often say, it's Little League baseball. Anything can happen, and it usually does. From this, I took away the need to be prepared, whether it was saving money for a rainy day, or in my case, his insistence that I take typing in high school. He said that because, you never know when you might have to support yourself. Okay, so at the time, I'm not going to lie, it kind of pissed me off because I said to him, did you tell Todd and Scott to take typing? And he looked at me and he's like, no. So I felt it was, a little bit perhaps chauvinistic for the times. But given my career in digital technology, it actually kind of paid off and was a good call. So I got to give him that. But lesson two, fortune favors the prepared. You're going to soon hear more about the legend of the two scoops and the Little League playoff. So I won't go into detail on that. But lesson number three, no task is insurmountable, especially with a little luck and the right motivation. When my father was not coaching Little League, he was providing dating advice. Not to me, but more to my kids. And he had told Tal, remember, girls like funny, not silly, funny. At 9 years old, I'm not really sure that Tal grasped the true meaning of that advice, but I'd like to think it's carried him forward. And I guess speaking for all womankind, I can say I agree. Funny, not silly. And speaking of silly, my father never missed an opportunity to dance. Crowded dance floor, empty dance floor, with music, without music, didn't matter. His signature moves were not to be outdone by his signature outfits and shoes. And if any of you have seen them, you're probably good to remember, usually with a cigarette and a drink in his hand at the same time. Lesson number 5. When you get the chance to sit it out or dance, dance. So my father liked to gamble. I'm sure some of you may be aware of that. As a family, most people went to the zoos or theaters. We went to Vegas, the racetrack, sports books, places like that. I was the only 10-year-old I knew who could read a racing form, with possibly the exception of Julie Rosenthal. His game was craps, and, he had some shtick. Had to press the 4s and 10s. And when rolling the dice, he would say, "I guess I'll have to do it for myself." Now, not really sure the origin of the phrase or why it was said with an accent, but that was part of his repertoire. But to me, it embodied self-reliance, courage, and strength to make your own luck and pave your own way, something he and his sister, Sarah Lee, learned at a very early age. Lesson 5, or maybe it's 6, I lost track. Always bet on yourself. My father also said, never gamble more than you can afford to lose. And I think, I've taken that with me, whether, in Vegas or with my career or matters of the heart. And on that last account, I truly lucked out with my husband, Yogev, who my father came to love like a son. As I spent time with my father in the hospital prior to passing, he kind of at some point was not really able to, communicate. But out of nowhere, he opened his eyes, he turned to me and said, "So what's new in Israel?" Which was really his way of saying that he'd always said, like, how's Yogi's family? So, I don't know if a lot of people know this story, but when Yogi went to ask for my hand in marriage, not customary in Israel, like people don't really do that, but I said it was important to me and I thought it would be important to my dad. So understandably, when he went to do it, he was a little bit nervous. So when he finished asking, my father put his hand on his shoulder, looked him straight in the eye and said, "No." Followed by, "Just kidding," which was very much his way. So if, lesson 6, you got to roll with the punches and have a sense of humor. The last lesson, oddly enough, occurred on a soccer field. The Yedlins play soccer. I don't know, some of you may know that or not, but yeah. Tal couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and Michael had come to a game to watch him play. And during the game, Tal was fouled blatantly, egregiously, I may add, and he fell to the ground where he stayed for a few seconds, and which to me felt like hours. And my instinct, of course, was to run to him. And as I kind of rose from my chair, Michael rather stoically said, "Let him go. You got to let him go." And sure enough, Tal popped up and after a brief stint on the sideline went on to play and finish the game. It is this lesson that feels most poignant today. The lesson being, when you love someone, there will come a time when you need to let them go. And today, sadly, is that day for my father. So in closing, I ask, the next time you stroll by a craps table, drive by a Little League field, order a corned beef sandwich, on rye, of course, or yell at the Bears, which there'll be ample opportunity over the next several years, that you think of him and smile. He would like that. Thank you and drive safe.
Scott.
Before I get to this, I knew the other day when we figured out I was following up Tracy that it would be a tough act to follow. It certainly was. It seems I always get that short straw, but life goes on. Mike. Mike was a man who answered to many names. Papa Mike, Paca Mike, MW, Mr. W when he was at the craps table, Mr. W as the horse owner, big boy, handsome boy in the office, coach, or just simply dad. You see, he and my mother adopted me when I was just 3 days old. And outside of being, where's Waldo, some of those family pictures, or you get that picture from the Warrens, who's the blonde kid? I couldn't have imagined a better life. They really treated me as their own. Mike was a caring, loving, and nurturing parent who wanted nothing but the best for his family, kids, but especially his grandkids. Don't mess with the grandkids. It was something he used to say to me often. There literally is so much material that could we discuss. I could be here for hours, but I promise you there will be very little duplication between the siblings here. The foremost memory of my friends and I have as my father is that he was dressed in one of his suits, literally from the moment he woke up until he went to bed. He didn't change when he came home. He would be in that suit, tie tucked all the way up, hanky, you got it, accessories were there. More on that later, but literally from morning to night, that's how he was dressed. And growing up, my father was a solid baseball coach. Really, he was actually really good. He stressed fundamentals, teamwork, and most of all, having fun. He also learned early on the way to get to a kid's motivation at that age is through their stomach. When the team was down and we needed a rally, he would loudly proclaim 2 scoops, holding up the number 2 all the time. And what that meant was if we were to pull out a W, he would buy every kid on that team 2 scoops of ice cream at the ice cream shop in town. Now, truth be told, he would buy us 2 scoops regardless if we won or not, but that was his shtick to get us motivated, was 2 scoops. But his favorite baseball story, because that was mine and ours, was the time he took a line drive to the back of his noggin, literally on his skull, a dead line drive during warm-ups. Michael's way couldn't be outdone. The ambulance, the stretcher, everything came, hauled him off to the ER, and figured that was the end of him. Being his son, should I go with? Should I stay? He told me to stay. I stayed. All of a sudden, in the 5th inning, we're down. Look out in the horizon, and here's Mike Warren with an ice pack on his head, coming back to the game, and he actually engineered a W. We pulled it out. It was an undefeated season, but that was one of his highlights of his career. And literally, I found later that he couldn't find a ride from the hospital home, so he had a neighbor come pick him up and drop him off at the field because his car was still at the field. Another classic story that I think needed to be shared was when I had a little mishap with this 2-door Jaguar. Came home visiting from college and just had a little fender bender. And got out of Dodge with the auto before the police showed up. And what do you do at late at night? I call my brother, my older brother, Todd. Todd, I need some help here. The car won't drive. We got it over to my buddy's house. Can you come? So Todd says, sure, let me get dressed. I'll be on the way. And hung up the phone. As he was getting out of bed, he looked, and there's my father in the doorway. I guess he heard the whole conversation. Basically, his first line was, is he in prison? It's true. But you see, that wasn't the bad part of the story. The bad part is my father had to drive a Chrysler K car for like the next 6 to 8 months. Something very important in my dad's life that hasn't been mentioned here yet was that he always liked to be looking good. Whether it was with his suits, in his cars, he had to be looking good. He used to claim that he looked like Robert Redford or Paul Newman when I was a kid. The young grandkids won't know who that is, but I promise you, he did not look like Robert Redford. My favorite fit in his collection when he was looking good was one electric blue sport coat. He wore this to many, many family occasions, but the shtick was I used to come in and pat him down. I said, there's got to be a battery pack in there somewhere. There's no way that coat could be that bright without batteries. But he was very, very proud of it, and he always had his ties, handkerchiefs, bally shoes, and belt to match, whether they be red, blue, white. He had it all. Things, again, that Zach would have absolutely no interest in owning later in life, but it meant the world to my father. And to top off his fit, growing up, there was always what we would call a Ludu from Lou Pagano. He went weekly or bi-weekly to the barber back then. It's almost like a beauty shop appointment, and got his hair done. And Lou became, part of the family. Cut my hair, Todd's hair, and to this day I still go to his grandson to have haircuts. But let's get a little bit about Added Sales, because Mike co-founded Added Sales in the early 60s with his partner Lee Rosenthal and Moon Siegel. Leo's here today. And while growing up, the family attended many company events as a family and also became dear friends with the Thals. But it wasn't until I went to work full-time at Added Sales that I truly realized how much his coworkers, suppliers, and even customers became his second family. Mike was a consummate salesman who wanted to buy what everyone else was selling. He used to swear the easiest sell was a salesman, but he always wanted to see the best in people and give them the benefit of the doubt. He also believed you only had one reputation, and to practice integrity all the time. He was a founding member of AMR, one of our national organizations, and served on many, many, many boards in industry things through the years. He was truly a boss, a friend, and a mentor to many in the industry. Mike truly enjoyed traveling with Brenda around the world. Yes, there are many funny stories, but once again, my favorite is when he curiously noted, "Oh, those poor people, their suitcases floating in the river," before taking a moment and going, "Wait, those are ours. That's our clothes." And I could literally go on, but Brenda and he had many memories. But their dog Sasha, like Coco, really stood out to me for the joy in his life. That little white fuzzball meant the world to my father and Brenda, and he made that known. He made that known. Even more so than looking good, cruising in the El Dorado in the villages, was that dog. He was proud of Brenda's psychology degrees and certificates, while I still believe he might have been her patient 01. Constant work going on there. I would be remiss not to mention the help all of his caregivers provided later in life. And while there were many, there was only one Debbie, who's here today in the front row. Debbie's with us today and is truly part of the family, and a sincere thank you. You were a great friend of my father, and it's much appreciated. And while I can continue on and on about 50th birthday parties, BPs in Vegas, trips to Mexico, having the baseball team's equipment stolen in the trunk of your car, and endless memories, as Tracy said, with you with a drink in one hand, a smoke in the other, and doing the moves. He had a good ride. So thank you all for coming and supporting us during this difficult time. But once again, I will end with what Papa Mike would say to us, regardless if you're on the couch, on the beach, or anywhere in the world, drive safe. Thank you.
Todd.
As you've probably figured out by now, my father made his way in the world by talking. Ever since I knew him, since I was a small child, every room I was ever in, every time I walked by him, he was always, always, always talking. He was never quiet. He always had something to say. Didn't matter who was in the room, didn't matter what the subject was, it didn't matter if other people were talking. He immediately became entrenched in the conversation. And he always, always spoke with conviction and passion, and most importantly, certainty that he was always right. He loved to tell a good story, Over the years, the stories changed, the facts changed, but it was just still the general theme of, I'm going to try to make you laugh before you can make me laugh. And one thing for sure, he was the opposite of Switzerland. This man had a position on everything. Every subject, he staked out a territory. He was not ambivalent. He was not wishy-washy. If somebody was talking, he immediately took a position and joined the conversation, and wasn't afraid to confront anybody, wasn't afraid to talk to anybody, and loved to hear a good debate and participate in one. He had many passions. He was literally the staunchest Democrat I've ever seen in my life. I mean, every time I would talk to him, anytime a subject would come up or a politician's name was mentioned, it was like the man had a dossier on the person. He had a biography, where he stood on every issue, when he was running for election, who his opponents were, what I liked or didn't like about him, what was good or bad about him. He loved to debate politics. When we were kids, when the elections would come on, we'd all watch together, and he'd be constantly shushing us because he'd want to hear all the commentators on all the channels and what they had to say. The last few years, I would say to him, Dad, you're in Florida, why are you watching MSNBC every single day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed? Go outside, take a walk, get some fresh air, do something. And his stock answer every time was, Todd, you don't understand. I'm going to miss something if I leave. And I said, Dad, they replay this every day, all day, the same episodes. You can catch it in 2 hours. Oh, no, I want to see it live. Sometimes just for fun, I would take the other side of a position and try to argue with him and just try to get him going and try to make him laugh. He took debate every single time, up until the last conversation I had with him, which is basically 2-3 weeks ago. And every time I say to him, Dad, I'm doing this just to get you going here to make you laugh, he said, yeah, I know, but I can't help myself. He was truly a passionate sports fan as well. His first love was, as many of you know, the White Sox. And I didn't know any White Sox fan that was more devout and more in tune with the team in my entire life. I have to admit, in the last few years, he admitted that he thinks I passed him by a little bit, and I'm a little more nuts than he was. But as you all know, that's just part of our shtick. They say you remember your first baseball game you attend with your father. When I was 7 years old, after begging him for days, he took me to see the Oakland A's play the White Sox. And they were the world champions at the time. And I remember sitting way down the right field line in the upper deck, and we both felt like we were on top of the world. Luckily, through the grace of God, literally, the White Sox actually made it to the World Series in our lifetime. And he and I and Zach and Cameron got to go see Game 1. And literally, looking at his face, I felt like we were on top of the world again. Of course, with him, you couldn't just be a fan. There had to be all kinds of humor and shtick. It happened every year of my life, sometimes in person, sometimes on the phone, but it was the exact same conversation. It was basically the third week in March. The phone would ring. I'd know it was coming. I'd answer the phone and say, hey, Dad, what's up? His first line with a very hushed voice was, I'm really worried about the Cubs. I'm really worried this year. They're looking good. I'm very concerned that they're going to win this year. I don't care that much about the White Sox. Hopefully they'll be fine, but I'm really worried about the Cubs. What are we going to do? And I would laugh, and I'd say, Dad, don't worry. It'll be fine. They haven't won in a long time. And he said, no, you don't understand. The worst thing you'll ever have to deal with in your life, ever, is happy Cubs fans. And I would laugh, and he'd say, no, I'm not kidding. That's the worst thing you're ever going to have to deal with. One of my friends, when Zach was born, we had a bris at our house, and one of my friends thought it'd be cute to give me I forget what it was, a towel or a blanket or something with a Cubs emblem on it. He saw me take it from my friend, and my friend and I were laughing. He took it, literally walked by me, took it, threw it in the garbage, and looked at me, and he said, this is how you repay me. At my son's bris. He was also a passionate Bears fan. Some of my fondest memories as a child were going with him. My brother and I used to alternate every other week because we only had 2 tickets, but we would go with my father, and we would go pick up my uncle and my cousins, and we would drive to the game. Again, you had to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning sharp, get to the game. We would, the whole way there, the whole game, the whole way back, literally talking and complaining and bemoaning how terrible the team was. But there were some times, on some occasions, where we didn't walk. We walked by ourselves, and we didn't drive once we got there. And my father loved to walk through Grant Park. And in the old days, he loved to walk through the rail yards, which was way back when. And he loved to talk to me. And we had some of our best talks ever when I was a little boy. And I remember, in my memory, it was always freezing cold, and we were always freezing to death when we were walking through there. But on each of those occasions, he would talk to me about life. He would talk to me about what was important to him. And he would talk to me about what it takes to be a good man. Even today, when I drive by Grant Park or I drive by the stadium, I always get that warm feeling. Even though, again, we were probably freezing at the time, I always get that warm feeling in my heart thinking about how special those moments are with him and my uncle and my cousins. As everybody said before, we were involved in a lot of activities. He was a baseball coach. I'm not going to go into all that again. But he told me on many, many occasions that that was the best time of his life. His work ethic was remarkable. He always insisted on maxing out. He never took any shortcuts. And when we were kids, a long time ago, I worked in the warehouse a number of summers, and I worked in the office occasionally. And that's where I started to learn some of his famous work lines, what I call them. He used to say, you need to be the first one in and the last one out. You're supposed to be tired every night when you come home. That's why they call it work. Stop complaining about how tired you are, because no one cares. And Zach mentioned it, my all-time favorite, Todd, every day is not Hanukkah. You better get used to that now. As everyone said, my father had a ton of shtick. His clothes, the way he ate, his endless supply of flashy sport coats and bally shoes. But there was always one common theme with him through it all, and it was laughter. Whether we were laughing with each other or at each other, the goal of every interaction I had with him, it seemed like, was who can laugh first. Sometimes my kids will hear me say something, and they'll say, Dad, you sound just like Papa Mike. And I used to tell him that, and he got a big smile on his face, and he was so proud. Of course, he couldn't just leave it at that. He always used to say to me, why do they think that's funny? My father came from very humble beginnings. He had a very difficult childhood, and he grew up without a father. I know this is something that plagued him his whole life. He didn't have a male role model in his life. He never had anybody to pat him on the back, to watch his games, or to root for him the way he did for us all those years. Dad, your legacy is very simple. You and Mom taught us the difference between right and wrong. You instilled in us your work ethic, and of course, you made us laugh all the time. I said at the beginning that you made your way in the world by talking. What I'll remember most, though, is not the talking. It's that famous look. It's the look you gave me when each of my kids was born. It's the look you gave me when Lisa and I were married. It's the look you gave me when I came home after my first day of law school and I was out of my mind. And it's the look you gave me when you used to walk out to the pitcher's mound. And that look was always the same, and I interpreted it the same every time. It meant to me, you got this. You can do it. You can get there. Well, Dad, now it's my turn. It's time for you to rest comfortably and peacefully. You did it. You made it. And I'm proud of you.
When evening twilight fades away, the stars, invisible by day, shine forth against the darkness of the night. So too at death of one whom we love, in the darkness of our sorrow, the light of his life shines forth, clear and bright, warm and radiant and steadfast, lighting our way, lifting our path and our courage, a memory, an influence, and a presence to be treasured to the end of time. We stand now for the memorial prayer. El molei rachamim, shochein b'meromim, hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashechina, b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tehorim, kizor ki amazirim, et nishmat Michael, ben Yosef v'didl shalach le'olamaho, began Eden tehemenuchato, ono barachamim, hasirehu b'seiter kanafech le'olamim, utzror b'tzoror chayim et nishmato, Adonai unachaloto, v'yonuach b'shalom mishkavo, v'nomar Amen. The translation is on the bottom of the first page of the brochure. Please join with me where it says, El Malei Rachamim. You may take your seats. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Michael B. Warren, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may his repose be peace. And let us all say, Amen. Representatives of the United States Army are here to present the flag which drapes Michael's casket to his wife, Brenda.
Ma'am, on behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service. Thank you.
This does conclude the service here at the chapel. The interment and the shiva will be private. At this time, we'll ask you to please rise as we escort the casket from the chapel, and Mr. Warren's grandchildren, if they could step forward to help escort the casket.